Between the first bite and landing the fish, eternity envelops. And in this brief moment when mystery presides, anything's possible. Finally, some behemoth made the mistake. Or the imaginary presents a golden sunfish with magenta stripes. This fish, unlike any of the last spring spawn's anomalies, is yet another specimen representative of a peculiar reality just under the surface of these urban waters. Pumpkin seeds without their characteristic orange spot atop gill flaps. Purple fish striped like bluegills, donning another's wavy green headlines. And other traits, rare enough to obscure parentage. What is it about these lakes that produces so many hybrids? Instead of living among wild animals, now they live among us. During the late 20th century, the United States experienced its largest demographic shift from rural to urban. By 1990, 78% of Americans resided in metropolitan areas. This population shift led to rapid sprawling expansion of urban environments. And of these augmented habitats, aquatic ecosystems are the remaining intact natural food webs. Life still wildish despite the new era along their periphery. How has so much terrestrial change altered these lakes? Forming any hypothesis requires the examination of ecological dynamics. What habitats do these fish seek out, and how do they utilize them? What other animals must they negotiate with? Understanding the how of these lakes' ecology is why there's so many sunfish hybrids. Many factors influence the characteristics of any specific lake, such as geographical location. Minneapolis' chain of lakes is nestled near the middle of the north-central hardwood forests. Water temperature. Most aquatic organisms cannot regulate their own body temperatures. And water chemistry. Phosphorus, nitrogen, sulfate, and chloride counts vary, as does alkalinity across regions. A typical Minnesotan lake cannot be described. A watershed, the area which runoff drains into a lake, including all drainage from inflows, determines a lake's biological, chemical, and physical characteristics. The chain of lakes is a part of the Minnehaha Creek watershed. Formed during the last ice age, hunks of glacier left behind in ancient river valley, broken off during the planing retreat. These lakes are not made by aquifer nor stream. They take all natural and storm drain runoff from the surrounding environment. Interconnected during the early 1900s, these lakes now operate as a single water body, water flowing down the chain into Minnehaha Creek. Brownie Lake, the most northern of the lakes, was once larger than it is today. When connected to Cedar Lake via a navigable canal, water levels dropped by 10 feet. The Cedar Lake Canal, open to the Kenilworth Lagoon, dropped water levels here by 5 feet. Taking advantage of the lower water, the Minneapolis Park Board connected Louise Island to the mainland, creating Cedar Point Peninsula. And over time, the East Bay dried up. By the 1950s, the city held the area in such disregard that it was used as a garbage dump until today's cottonwoods sprouted through. Between 1889 to 1893, Lake of the Isles was even more dramatically transformed. The north arm was dredged to make its depth uniform, while on the east shore, 4.5 acres of marsh was filled in. 2 southwestern islands were eliminated as a consequence of these actions. Regularly, between 1910 and 1925, the entire shoreline of Biber was extended and reinforced, to some degree, by dredge fill to support the parkway's construction that wraps around the water's perimeter. On the northwestern side, a boat launch. And 3 beaches have been distributed around the lake. Near Lake Harriet's northeastern boat launch, water flows down a pipe-connected channel from Biber. The northwest portion of the lake was dredged and portions filled in to make meadows for picnicking out of marsh. Through a submerged pipe, water from Lake Harriet flows down to Minnehaha Creek, which, not too much further down basin, pours into the Mississippi. Limnologists who study lake chemistry divide lakes into a variety of zones. The littoral zone, where sunlight penetrates to the bottom, is distinguished by rooted plants. The limnetic zone is the portion of well-lit deep water, which sits atop the profundal zone, lightless water where photosynthesis does not occur, and the benthic zone, where sediment collects. The majority of a lake's life is sustained along its shores, where the most sunlight is absorbed. Communities of algae, rooted in floating aquatic plants, snails, clams, insects, crustaceans, amphibians, and fishes interact and become interdependent, attracting life from beyond this aquatic boundary. Migratory birds and other larger animals prowl these shallows for food. Adult fish procreate in the littoral zone, establishing nests and laying eggs. Male sunfish build the nests and guard the eggs. All species of sunfish choose locations under 2 feet deep. Both bluegill and green sunfish are colony nesters. Green sunfish aim for full sun exposure, while bluegills will tend towards shade cover. Pumpkin seeds are more solitary, laying eggs amidst the emergent plants. This type of resource partitioning occurs as a means of easing competition between similar species. Differential exploitation is another means of easing competition. Males will defend the nests without leaving to forage until the eggs hatch. Afterwards, adults generally will linger on the edges of the littoral and move beyond, so as to exploit other food sources that are more optimal for their larger bodies. When they can forage for themselves, fry are left alone. This transformation from hatchling to free swimming takes just days and is heavily influenced by water temperature. At this time, the fry measure around 1/4 of an inch in length. Bluegills, by the time they've about doubled their body size, will move out of the littoral zone, returning once they've doubled their size again. Pumpkin seed fry, on the contrary, remain in the littoral zone until maturity. Even their predators take advantage of the safety of the littoral zone for their developing young. This developmental stage is a race for all young of the year to build up enough body and energy reserves to survive the coming winter. Largemouth bass fingerlings first start feeding on microcrustaceans. By the time they've grown to 1 to 3 inches in length, insects and water fleas are incorporated into their diets. Small fish, minnows, and other fry slowly begin entering the diet at this stage. It is the eventual switch to primarily eating fish that marks fitness, such as this young bass sashaying in the shallows. Rated at a crepuscular rhythm, predators from the limnetic turn this nursery into a pantry. Consider an apex predator. Lie-in-wait predators such as northern pike hide in weeds. Thick weeds block the light, and like a side room with the lights turned off, the hunter lurks, watching concealed by the light bathing a milling shoal. Their elongated, torpedo-esque bodies with flattened heads, large caudal fins, and dorsal and anal fin placement far back on the body allows for the thrust needed to launch out at passing prey. Such morphologies are well suited for their solitary, ambushing lifestyles. The relationship between behavior and morphology is exemplified by comparison with another top predator's adaptations. Largemouth bass express a rover-predator body type. Fins more evenly distributed about the body provide stability, prioritizing maneuverability. Constantly searching for prey, bass often travel in small groups, scattering bait fish and capturing in pursuit. Following their food, these predator fish spend most of their time near and immersed where panfish congregate, spending a great amount of their life in the limnetic zone. Above the depth at which light penetration ceases, The limnetic zone is the open and well-lit portion of a freestanding body of fresh water. Together, the littoral and limnetic zones is where all the sun's energy is absorbed. Differentiated by the absence of rooted plants, oxygen production balances with respiration because algae are the sole primary producers. Life develops in the littoral and vies throughout the limnetic. And in these two lake habitats, one can witness the regulation of ecological diversity, how constant change frequently appears as balance. Not all species are created equal. Keystone species help hold ecosystems together. Disproportionate to their numbers, keystone species exert effects upon the diversity and stability of their ecosystems. Magnitude of influence, not position in food web, distinguishes. Largemouth bass serve this role in many Midwestern lakes. When bass have been removed from certain lakes, trophic cascades have been witnessed. Minnows, what the bass ate, increased in numbers, which decreased the population of zooplankton, what the minnows ate. Zooplankton eat phytoplankton, which, if left to grow unregulated, an algal bloom occurs, depleting oxygen levels, killing fish, and, possibly, turning the water toxic. Competition is the demand of more than one organism for the same resource of a particular habitat in excess of available supply. See this pike's healed harlequin scar? Possibly, an eagle lost its lunch. However, fish often play a dual role as predator and prey. Cannibalism, albeit observed in many fish species, is a response typical to trophic cascades. Most interactions between individuals are latent with the potential to alter chances of genetic survival. Intense exchanges are the norm. Body size determines the mechanism of population regulation in food webs. Smaller animals are regulated by predators, while larger animals by availability of prey. Certain species populations are controlled by density-dependent feedback. A population's growth rate declines as its members increases. Reducing simultaneously bottom-up and top-down regulation. Migration aids survival by increasing access to food, at the same time decreasing susceptibility to predators. These regulatory factors, happening constantly and simultaneously, tend to reduce the likelihood of anomalies like hybridization. Most hybrids are the byproduct of accidental mixing of sex products of two similar species that happen to be at the same location at the same time. Such as when different sunfish-preferred spawning locations are closer together, especially if colony nesters, peripheral nests being the most vulnerable. Usually, wild hybrids are either sterile or their parent species possess competitive advantage in occupying their respective niches. Success of hybrids, typically, is observed in altered environments, those that produce new types of habitats. Crosses between species of darters are abundant only in portions of northeastern streams that have underwent shoreline development.
Several city beaches are closed right now because of pollution.
At what's known as the cleanest lake in Minneapolis, all 3 Cedar Lake beaches are off limits. Sanitation sewage backup in St. Louis Park is impacting water quality.
We often think of pollution as poisoning with toxic chemicals. Any substance can be toxic at certain concentrations. Excess phosphorus, for example, from yard and agricultural runoff can overload a lake, resulting in the overproduction of plant life. Paved surfaces inhibit soil absorption of urban runoff, exacerbating erosion and accelerating the filling of lakes with sediment. Lakes age by gradual accumulation of vegetation and filling in with sediment, altering chemical and physical characteristics. The youngest, least productive lakes are classified as oligotrophic. Water in these lakes is clear and saturated with oxygen, though low in nutrients. Eutrophic lakes are shallower and rich in nutrients and algae, making their water greener in color as well as less transparent. Mesotrophic lakes are an intermediate between the two stages. Urbanized and agricultural watersheds can cause the shift of mesotrophic lakes to eutrophic status. Signs of cultural eutrophication include unseasonably frequent and potent algal blooms.
For weeks, really since ice up, people have noticed that Cedar Lake looks weird. It's brown, it can look like a latex paint, and now the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board says it's probably a blue-green algae, which is considered harmful.
Dense plant growth, decreased oxygen levels, and winter kills, and the introduction and establishment of invasive species. The proportion of impaired lakes in Minnesotan watersheds. Data from Minnesota's Pollution Control Agency. Even with so many watersheds without assessment, a pattern does emerge. Urbanized and agricultural areas host the most impaired bodies of water. Hybridization is much more common in freshwater relative to ocean fishes. Primarily a function of ecosystem size, a whole host of human activities coalesced to yield Minneapolis's chain of lakes' current state. Loss of habitat by way of shoreline development, benthic feeding by invasive species, aside from uprooting plant life, releases stored nutrients at the sediment level. Excessive runoff containing a myriad of chemicals, increasing concentrations of natural compounds while introducing a host of synthetics. So many recreational activities contribute to the lowering of apex predators that aid in the regulation of small fish, such as sunfish populations. All of these factors facilitate an ecosystem where habitat, especially that for spawning, has been reduced, while population sizes of sunfish seem to be increasing. Under such conditions, pumpkin seeds will resort to colony nesting to alleviate the additional competition. Not just behavioral changes are experienced, further increase in proximity to other spawning colonies yields more and more opportunity for hybridization. Hybridization represents profound consequences. Genetic mixing of similar fishes rarely leads to the development of a new species. Disappearances of species from ecosystems is much more common. For instance, cutthroat trout have been eliminated from much of its native range in the Great Basin through hybridizing with introduced rainbow trout. And how, just under the surface, can our collective actions go unnoticed? The last 60 years of conservation efforts have cultivated wonders, beautiful anomalies save for paddling atop, swimming through, jogging around, living up against, and fishing from. Quite the curious petri dish.